Hey everybody, today is a great day, and the reason is I'm going out to do some winter dry fly fishing. I've been stuck ice fishing a whole lot. I know I shouldn't complain that I'm fishing too much, but haven't been able to get on the river, and we're in prime dry fly time out here in Utah. So today we're gonna go over some tips and tricks on how to fish small dry flies, some tips on how to see them. A lot of clients I have complaining they can't see small dries. They think it's too small and technical. Hopefully today you get some good information on how to fish those little dries. Got it. That was a big long cast. Oh, damn it. Got him. I think I was getting drag and he refused it. Oh. All right, so we got to the river. Bugs aren't quite going off yet, but I wanted to go over some rigging stuff for you guys. How I rig small dry flies, I think it's really important. But first and foremost, I want to go over time of day. Generally, when you're fishing small dry flies, I mean, aside from tricos in the summertime, but usually you're thinking blue-winged olives, you're thinking midges. Those types of hatches usually occur in the shoulder seasons or off season in winter, fall, or spring. And generally, as far as time of day goes, if you're trying to get out and do some winter dry fly fishing, I'm getting distracted by looking for fish. Generally, that's going to be in the middle of the day. So today I got out at about 11. I'm guessing the hatch is going to start at around noon. So time of day wise, that's what you want to look for. So as far as rigging the small dry fly goes, I'm really picky on my leaders, and there's a few things you need to take into consideration when you're fishing those smaller dries. The first thing is drag becomes a lot bigger of a problem, and it's also a lot harder to detect when you're fishing tiny dry flies. When you think about small dry flies, size 18s to say 24s, even smaller if you're real crazy, it doesn't take a whole lot to get those flies to drag. Even a tiny bit of leader on the water can absolutely drag those flies, and they're so small, it's almost impossible for you to pick that up by looking at it. So if you're not catching fish, generally with dry flies, I always suspect drag, but with especially these small dry flies, suspect drag first and foremost before you start changing flies. Now there's a few things I do to combat that. The first thing I do is I start fishing a lot smaller tippet for a number of reasons. One of them being though is I want a super small chunk of tippet, pretty long, attached to that fly, just because it's going to help avoid drag because there's less surface area on that thin tippet. The other thing is I tend to fish a lot longer leaders because again, it's super easy to get these tiny dry flies to drag. So what I'm going to start off with today is actually a 6X 10-foot leader. It's 10 feet, not 9 feet. And I'm even going to add tippet to that because I want a big, long, skinny section. So when I cast, that tippet chunk's going to land in a pile and give it some slack. I'm just going to try and avoid the drag right out the gate by doing a lot longer and thinner piece of tippet. Another tip for you guys when you're undoing a brand new leader, a lot of times people will get a new leader and they'll get it tangled up. Here's how to do it and not get it tangled up. Put the loop that it comes in around your finger and slowly work. It's crisscrossed around the entire circle, so work those loops out on the butt section, and I've just got it on 3 fingers like this. And then you're gonna get to a point, I'm coming up on it soon, where it's no longer crossing, it's no longer wrapped around, now it's just in a circle. And all I do is pull that off while extending those fingers out. And that'll make it to where 100% of the time, you get a fresh new leader out without getting into giant knots. So I've got my fresh new leader on there, 10 feet, down to 6X. And I'm gonna actually add some more tippet to here. Again, I'm just trying to avoid that micro drag that I'm not gonna be able to see because these flies are so small. I generally, when I'm fishing small dry flies, go to Trout Hunter 6.5X, right there. What I love about 6.5X, I do fish 7, but when I'm fishing with clients, I found 6.5X can make a difference as far as getting drag, or if I'm nymphing, sinking a little bit faster, just because that smaller surface diameter. But it's not as crazy as 7X. 7X, a lot of people end up breaking flies off. I break flies off on 7, and I found 6.5 is really that happy medium. So I'm a big fan of that 6.5, and I'm gonna grab another chunk of about, I don't know, 20 inches or so, and I'm gonna add that onto that 10-foot leader. So I'm fishing an ultra long leader, and again, that's just because I'm trying to avoid that micro drag. One of the biggest complaints I get from people and hear from people when they're fishing tiny dry flies is they don't do it because they think it's too hard, they can't see the dry flies. And there's a couple tips and tricks I use when I'm fishing with people to help it to where they can actually see the dries. The number one thing I almost always do when I'm fishing small dries is I almost always fish a double 2-fly rig. And the reason I do that is it usually allows me to fish some sort of pattern that I can see well. On the top, on the front end, I'm gonna do some sort of pattern I can see. Now, I'm not gonna go and do some crazy like, you know, royal wolf or giant caddis. I've seen that spook fish if you're fishing like a big giant dry and then you trail your little midge behind it. I'm not talking doing that. I don't think in low clear water, which is typically where you're fishing small dry flies, I don't think that's a good option. But I usually just go with some sort of visible small dry fly. So in this case, I'm fishing what's called a mother shucker, a little fly. It's really bright. This one's gray. It stands out on the water really well for me. And then below that, I'm gonna trail some sort of little emerger. In this case, I'm gonna do a little soft tackle midge pattern that I tie. Now, I'm not really gonna be able to see that little midge, that dropper, but I can see this. So usually what I recommend for people doing is fishing some sort of parachute. Like if you're fishing blue-winged olives, fish some sort of parachute you can see and trail it with some sort of emerger behind it. But just be sure one of those flies is something you can see. Now, the last little rigging bit for how I like to fish my rigs is floatant. And my personal favorite floatant pretty much year round is the Loon Lock Saw floatant. And they label it as, oh, you can use it for CDC, whereas other floatants will sink CDC, and that's great and all. But the real reason I like this product is it's a lot less affected by outside temperatures. Especially fishing small dries in the wintertime, you'll find like the Loon Aquel or the Gink, those tend to get really gummy and really thick, and it gets hard to squeeze it out of the bottle, all of that. So I'm not a huge fan of that. And then in the summertime, it gets super thin and just gushes out all over the place. Whereas the Lock Saw generally is a pretty consistent viscosity. So you can see there, it didn't gum up at all. I put that on my upper fly, and on my back fly, since it's a little emerger, I actually want it to sink just a little bit. I'm just gonna put some on the chunk of tippet up above that. But that's why I like the Lock Saw. It's a good product, I'm a fan. It's a little more expensive, but like I said, less affected by temperature. So, like I said, I can see that upper fly, that little mother shucker, and then this little fly down here, I'm not gonna be able to see at all. So what I do when I fish this is I can see this fly right here when I make that cast, and if I see a rise anywhere around this mother shucker, I'm gonna set the hook. It means the fish is probably eating this other fly right here. So even though I can't see it, if I see a rise anywhere near this or on this, I'm setting the hook. Now, occasionally I get clients that can't see the flies, even if I have a highly visible midge or blue-winged olive on there, just size 18s, things like that. They can't pick them up no matter what I do. And so I have a couple workarounds for that. So if your eyesight's bad and you can't see, there's a couple options for you. First and foremost, I couldn't get my hands on it today. They had stopped making it, the Rio Kahuna indicators. And it's essentially a small chunk of fly line that you can slide onto your leader. And it's super, super minimal, super tiny. They had stopped making them. I thought I had seen them in fly fish food the other day. I went in today and they didn't have them. So I don't know, I'll have to look into that and see if it's available on the Rio website. But usually what I do is I'll take a little chunk of that Kahuna indicator, or today I'm gonna be using a tiny chunk of yarn, a New Zealand strike indicator. And I'm gonna put that up just about, 4 or 5 feet above my dry flies. I don't want it too close to my dries because I don't want the fish to be seeing that and spooking. Again, we're in super low clear water a lot when we're fishing small dries. So I'll actually put a strike indicator on there. Like I said, I like the yarn. It lands softly when you're fishing dry flies and doesn't spook the fish as much. And I'm gonna do just a tiny piece. So with people that can't see, that's a really good option. And it's gonna work just like I said on that more visible dry fly. I'm just gonna be watching that yarn And if I see a rise around that yarn, I'm gonna set. So just to show how I can fish that New Zealand indicator, or like I said, if you have that Rio Kahuna, I actually like that a little bit more. It's just less air resistant, so casting's a little bit easier. You'll see up here on the butt section, I just put a tiny chunk of yarn. Doesn't need to be big at all. Doesn't need to suspend a nymph or anything. It's just there literally so I know roughly where my tiny dry flies are. And I know that a couple feet around it, I've got my 2 flies. So if I see a rise anywhere around that little chunk of yarn, I know to set the hook. So yes, old guys, dudes who can't see, you can fish tiny dry flies. So I got out here and the hatch hadn't really started, and I decided to nymph a little bit, and as I was nymphing, I caught like 3 right away. And then I started to notice some rises, and I can't do this when I'm guiding, but when I'm out personally fishing, I tend to do this. As I start to see those rises, I like to step back and just wait. The hatch is starting to come. I'm getting some fish rising sporadically, and it's really important then, especially with small dries, to start watching those rise forms, watch what the fish are doing. A lot of people just tend to stumble in and start fishing right away at fish, and they're slogging through the water and doing all sorts of crazy stuff and spooking fish. So I stopped nymphing. I was like, you know what? I'm here to fish dries. I'm gonna just sit back and watch. One thing I've noticed is a lot of the rises I'm seeing is I'm not seeing any mouths come up. It's basically just their dorsal fins coming up, and that tells me they're eating a lot just beneath the surface. And that's where it's really important to have that second dry fly on there. I've got that dry fly that I can see, kind of acting as an indicator. And then I've also got another dry on there that's gonna sit just beneath the surface. So I'll be watching that dry fly that's more visible, but really be looking around it for any sort of rise. So just start watching the fish behavior. Are you seeing their noses come up all the way? That tells you that they're eating something off the surface. Are you just seeing dimpling rises? Are you seeing dorsal fins? That tells you, okay, they're probably eating emergers. Like that one, he ate a full-on dry. The other thing to look for is bubbles in the rise form. If a fish comes up and eats a dry fly and sucks it in from the surface, there was a dorsal fin rise out there, what that tells you is what's gonna happen is he's gonna go in and suck that fly down, and when he goes back down, he's gonna expend the air he sucked in out through his gills. So if you see a bubble in the rise form, that tells you they're eating something off the actual surface, not just emergers. Right now I'm getting a little bit of both, which is cool. I've got dry flies that imitate both stages of these insects. So we'll just sit back, watch, and once the hatch really starts to get going, we'll get after it. Okay, that dude. Got him. That was a big long cast. Sniped him from a mile away. Sucker. That's how that goes. So we got our flies in there, heading right into the trout. Oh, I missed him, son of a... You can tell I nymph fish too much. I'm missing all my dry fly sets. Oh, that's a good fish right there. Right on the money. Oh, nope. I missed him by like an inch. Oh, there he is. Got him. I can set the hook on a dry fly fish. But you'll notice how close I was. Short drifts, you know, 5-6 feet. He ate that little emerger. He rose next to my other dry fly and I got him. The other thing you'll notice I did is I immediately started walking back slowly. In low clear water with small dries, the fish will get pretty spooky. So I backed out to try and get him out of there so he doesn't put the other fish down. And that's a decent middle Provo brown trout. Post spawn, they're all skinny. Right there. How did I not catch him? That fish has shoulders. Okay, I'm in his wheelhouse. Got him. Ha 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 ha. I said I was in his wheelhouse. Ha ha ha. There he was. Boom. And again, you can see the casting accuracy was super important. He's not moving far. He's got one little lane he's feeding in. And got to him. Got a nice, perfect drift right into his face. Got, oh, son of a I suck. Dear Lord, am I whiffing. Let's go after those big dogs. I can't, oh, he clobbered that. Oh, nice. He came, there's no way I was missing that. Even though I'm missing everything today, I couldn't miss that one. Dear gosh. Oh, he popped off. That is why you shouldn't be horsing fish, guys. I horse fish, you know why? Because I really don't care that much if I land them. Could have played them a little softer on these small hooks, but like I said, I don't particularly care if I land them. Of course, that's the guy who's losing all his fish. That's of course what he would say, right? We all have off days, all right? I've been on the ice. I have an excuse. I've been ice fishing. I haven't been fly fishing. Oh, there's a fish. I was about to pick up and recast and he was on. He's on the no-see him. Woo! Got him. Oh, okay, maybe I won't horse this one in. Maybe I'll actually show that I can, in fact, land a fish. Ah! Man, he's pissed. Let's go. Let's go. This is so much better than ice fishing. Don't get me wrong, ice fishing's fun, but trout on dry flies in February, you can't beat it, man. You just can't beat it. Just no better. Boop. Oh, you tangled yourself up. Boom. Trout on a dry. Nice. One thing you'll notice I saw a lot of fish rising down here in the slower part down here, but you'll see how close I am to shore. One really important thing when fishing small dry flies, especially in low clear winter water, is really taking your time to wade slowly and softly to not spook fish. I mean, right here, if I were to wade super hard, it would send ripples all across this pool. So I snuck in super slow, super quiet. I'm not moving around a ton, and I'm not really getting right on top of the fish either. You'll also notice I tend to fish pretty much either straight upstream or quartering upstream or downstream. Straight across stream presentations with small dries tend to not work great because of that drag that I talked about earlier. And with these tiny flies, you're not really going to be doing any mending. If you mend, you're basically going to pick those flies up and move them. So really what it is super short drifts, upstream or straight downstream. Across stream doesn't tend to work that great. The other thing you'll notice I do is I'm not really out here flock shooting, just throwing a ton of line all over the water. It's the old Kelly Gallup saying, hunt it, don't hope it. I do that with these dry flies. I find a fish that's rose a couple times and I cast at that fish as opposed to just throwing it across the pool and getting long drifts. Long drifts are almost impossible because these flies are going to drag, so it's a relatively short drift. So you really want to have pinpoint accuracy, get a short drift over that fish, and once you're over that fish, go ahead and recast. So got him. Stuck him. Oh, he's a good one. That's what it's all about. Hunt it, don't hope it. Put it right over an individual fish. We're not just out there flock shooting. Boom. Okay. Targeting that dude. I think he's... Oh! How did I miss that? I think I was getting drag and he refused it. Oh! Come on. Getting dragging. I think he refused it at the last second. This is where you can see that a cross stream presentation isn't working great. I'm gonna have to throw an aerial mend in my cast here. So yeah, if you ever need to mend, like in that situation, I needed to mend because I have that faster water between me and where I was fishing. You need to learn to throw aerial mends in your line, basically make a cast. And before the line lands, all you do is you do your normal casting stroke, and right before or after you finish your forward stroke, shoot the rod to the direction you want to mend. So I'm gonna go here, here, shoot it over to the right. That didn't work. So I'm gonna go here, and then I bring my rod to the right. Now those can sit in that pool, and now I actually get a drift, and now we're dragging. This little guy keeps going crazy. Got him. So there, I just pretty much picked out somebody that was more consistently rising. He was eating quite a bit, so I decided to target him. Boom, got him. So when I'm doing that, it's kind of hard to explain to people, but I'm not getting tunnel vision, right? Like I kind of keep my eyes peeled. I'm watching rise forms all over the place through my peripheral vision. And I noticed that this guy kept just eating on top. He just kept going, kept going, kept going. So that was my cue to go after him. Got him. As we get further on in the spring, the hatches are only gonna get better and better. This is still requiring it's still fairly tough fishing. I mean, casting accuracy has been vital. And if you miss them by an inch, they're not doing it. But here in another couple weeks, these fish are gonna be just going insane. Ooh, microcurrent moved it out of his lane. Oh, and I still had him. He ate that sunk one off the back. There we go. Hey, that's a better trout. Yeah, there we go. Look at him. He doesn't... The little guys have a lot more fight than this dude. Woo! There we go. There's a middle Provo trout for you. We have a pretty small average fish size in this river. That's a pretty decent one. Look at that, right in the corner of the mouth. Get him unhooked. Long and lanky. By the summertime, he's gonna be fat and big. Get him back in. Nice. That when I was listening to Joe Roeder's podcast, he owns Red's Fly Shop. He's one of the owners there. This is something I'd never really put together. I mean, I put it together, but I had never really voiced it. One of the important parts with seeing small dry flies is casting accuracy and being able to have your flies land right where you're looking. When that happens, you're gonna see the flies land and you'll have a much easier time picking up those flies, as opposed to if you're not an accurate caster and you're looking at a spot and your flies go somewhere else entirely, you're gonna be totally clueless as to where they are, and it's hard to pick out those tiny little dry flies. We're gonna catch a fish out of that line over there. He's eating. And I won't horse this one in. This last fish, I'll actually land it. Just to prove that I can. Ha ha! Got him. Gonna play him nice and light so he doesn't pop off of that hook. You ate one too many midges in a row. Sorry, my dude. Little feller, but still a fish. Well, that's a wrap on today. Thanks for watching, everybody. Highly recommend you get out there to your local water, see if you got some small dry flies hatching in the middle part of the day. It's a ton of fun. There's nothing like catching fish on dries in the snow. Doesn't get much better than that. Hopefully you learned some good tips and tricks to have success out there on your next outing. Please help me out by sharing, subscribing, liking, commenting. Anything you can helps. I appreciate it, and have a good time out there on the water.